Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our demonstration of the Watershed Game. I'm so pleased to have so many of you with us, and we welcome you to join us for the next hour here. My name is John Bellata, and I'm with Minnesota Sea Grant and the University of Minnesota Water Resources Center. I'll be one of your hosts today. I'm joined by two other colleagues from Minnesota Sea Grant, Maggie Karchnia and Cole Fisher, and my colleague Karen Bareford from Mississippi Alabama Sea Grant. So for the next hour, we are going to spend some time introducing you to the Watershed Game. I have a brief PowerPoint to guide us through that, but more importantly, we're going to have a demonstration of the Watershed Game through Zoom. And so I will tell you in advance that you will need to have an additional web browser window open, a smartphone or other smart device, because we're going to use a polling software called Poll Everywhere. So be prepared for that. I also know that many of you joined because you are interested in one particular version of the Watershed Game called the classroom version. So towards the end of our hour, I will highlight the features of the classroom version and invite you to join us for a full training of the Watershed Game October 25th and 26th. In the meantime, as we go through our presentation today, if you have questions, which you most certainly will, please use the Zoom Q&A function to ask your questions. If you have technical problems or other comments, please enter those in the chat box as we go. I will just mention about 10 minutes before we started, I lost power here from my home office, so we're operating not quite as efficiently as I had hoped, but I think we'll manage. All right, so what is the Watershed Game anyways? The Watershed Game was developed by Minnesota Sea Grant over 15 years ago, and it is an interactive simulation that guides participants through building their understanding about watershed management and how the way that we use the landscape affects water quality and water resources. The Watershed Game is an interactive activity as demonstrated by the pictures that you see here. It is meant to gather a group of participants around the game board to run through this simulation. Why did we develop the Watershed Game? When we started thinking about the challenges we were encountering, talking to community citizens and stakeholders and decision makers about watershed management and the issues and the challenges we were seeing with water quality specifically, we encountered some barriers to having good discussion with stakeholders. We found stakeholders protecting their turf, pointing fingers at other people as the sources of the problem. And overall, we observed a lack of understanding about the effects of land use on water quality. Well, we turned our efforts to looking at games. Why do simulations and games work so well? We have a lot of fun when we play games. When we looked at the research, and we looked at our experience using games, they work because these are role-playing exercises, they are fun, they're adaptable to a variety of levels of interest and age. They often work in a small amount of time, everyone's involved, they're interactive. So all these traits of games expressed traits that we could incorporate into what we developed with the Watershed Game. What we know works is small group situations where people get to know each other, they have a social component, but they also can strategize about bargaining for shared purpose to try to reach the end of the game, the goal of the game. And often that includes a bit of education, but also teamwork. So the Watershed Game in a nutshell, how does it work? When we play the Watershed Game, participants play in land use teams. and they use limited financial resources to reduce pollution from a land use going to a local waterway. In other words, they try to achieve a clean water goal. That's the goal of the watershed game. Participants or teams do this by selecting from a variety of solutions. In the watershed game, we call them tool cards. You may be more familiar with these tools as BMPs, or best management practices. The suite of tools that we use in the game include practices, but they also include planning and policy components. Other aspects of the game, well, we got to have money. The teams work with Watershed Game money or other units of money, and they have to balance their choices of these tools with their available budget. Another aspect of the game is that participants get to experience, as a surprise, unanticipated events that might happen in their community, such as a flood. So they sometimes don't see these unanticipated events coming, but they discover that sometimes these impact our work towards the clean water goal. During the last part of the game, what participants discover in their land uses is they cannot achieve the goal of the game, the clean water goal, without collectively working together across land uses. So what I want to show you here in a couple slides are our variety of watershed games that are available. We actually have 4 different versions of the game intended for local leaders. These are community groups, neighborhood groups, groups of decision makers, church groups. They are meant to be used with adults, and we call these our local leader versions. And there are 4 different models available to be used with local leaders. They represent different water resources. The one that's on the screen with you here is our stream version, which is the version that we will be using during our demonstration today. One of the things that you can see here is the watershed boundary depicted by this green dashed line. Now, there's a lot of detail you can't see on your laptop or computer screen with these board games, but this board game is actually about 3 by 5 feet in size. So it's relatively large. It's the size of a small banquet table. Another model of the local leader version is the lake model. This is meant to represent a typical lake with land uses that surround that lake, including agriculture, farmland, parks and cabins, residential, and a small city. And so all of these different models with the local leader, they operate the same, but their main water feature is a little bit different and unique. The third version we have available in the local leader model is the large river version. And this is meant to represent a large river flowing through a community that includes agriculture, parks and open space, a new land use to the game called industrial area, residential, and a big city. So I know there's a lot of detail you can't, again, see on these screens, but all these land uses have a variety of impacts to the water resource that is featured. Variety of pollutants do show up here if you were to see the game boards in person. So these watershed games actually fit together in a series. You play each one individually, but I wanted to illustrate here that the stream version actually feeds into the lake model, which feeds into the big river version, which feeds into all large rivers in the US eventually end up on a coast, whether in the Great Lakes or one of the coasts around the country. And so our newest game board to our suite is the coast model, representing a fresh or saltwater estuary along our coast. So I do want to spend a bit talking about the classroom version. I'm going to wait to do that until after our demonstration today. The classroom version of the game has been adapted to be used in both formal education settings for K through 12, but also other informal settings like with a 4-H group or some other group with youth, perhaps at a field day experience. So I'll talk more about how the classroom version is different after our demonstration. Some of the game features that we use during the game is all the land uses play simultaneously together. They're trying to achieve this clean water goal, but representing their small land use. And again, they choose between these tool cards, trying to balance their money, the watershed game money, which is very similar to Monopoly money, and they have to weigh their cost benefit. Again, what these teams are trying to do is to achieve this clean water goal. I do want to take a little time to focus in on some of the tool cards here. So some of the tool cards that are featured on your screen here, some of our tools are circular in our games. And what I want you to see here is that each tool card has a name. And on the front side of the card, it has a cost and a reduction of some non-point source pollutant. Sediment, phosphorus, and now nitrogen is included in the game. Over on the right-hand side, our newest versions of the cards are rectangle. And you can see they have a cost in a larger increment values, as well as these pollutant reductions in nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment. What's new in the coast model of the game is we both play simultaneously to achieve a clean water goal, but also to increase a community's resilience to flooding. And that has to do with this resiliency factor in this score box. Also on the back side of the cards, there is a plain language description. Now in the local leader versions, the science content of these descriptions is meant for adults, versus in the classroom version, we've made these descriptions a little bit more plain language at a 7th grade reading level. Some other features of the Watershed game that we aren't unfortunately going to have a time to experience today, but I did want to tell you about them, is things like the unanticipated events. During the gameplay, the facilitator, which when we train facilitators through our Train the Trainer workshop, you learn how to introduce some unanticipated events as the teams play. For example, a community experiences a flood. And what that will do is take away money from different land uses to solve flooding issues. And then they have less money to spend on the clean water goal. That's just one example. Some other things that you're not going to see through our virtual demo today is our use of facilitator scorecards. How is the team leaders and how is the Watershed Game facilitator keeping track of all the money and the pollution units coming and going? Well, we have these scorecards that you use both as a facilitator and in the individual land uses. Another aspect is the plan card. During the game, we offer land use teams to buy into the concept of watershed planning. Some teams buy into it, some teams don't, and what they discover in the end is planning pays off. Last but not least, one of the game features towards the end of the game is we offer this land sold and developed. Now the Watershed game has been designed so, maybe 95% of the time, the teams achieve the clean water goal. But in the end, some land is sold and developed, which changes the pollutant load. So their progress that they think they've made may not be made for the future as land is developed and redeveloped. So we try to get participants to think about both current pollutant load and potential future pollutant load. All right, so perhaps that's enough of me trying to talk through what the Watershed game is through PowerPoint slides. We are going to do a demonstration now. Now, a few caveats about our online Zoom demonstration today. Again, the Watershed game was designed to be used in person. We gather students and adults around the Watershed game to play. And as you all know, everything changed with the COVID pandemic. So what we're trying to do today is to demonstrate virtually how the watershed game works. We won't be separating into land use teams. All 38 of you that have joined us today will be playing as one land use team as we demonstrate how tool selection works. So we won't get this debate between land use teams like you would normally get when we play the game in person. But you'll get a feel for the land uses close up. We're going to zoom in on the game board so you can see some of the detail, and you'll look at the cards a little bit closer and the points and the selection. So again, if you have questions as we go through the demonstration or about some of the things that I briefly presented, please enter those in the Q&A question panel of Zoom, and we'll tackle as many questions as we can towards the end of the session. If you have comments or technical issues, please enter those in the chat box. At this point, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague Karen Bareford from Mississippi-Alabama Sea Grant. She's going to lead us through a demonstration of the stream model. Karen.
Thank you very much, John. Welcome everyone today. As John said, while we have 4 different models of the local leader version of the stream game, or of the watershed game, I'm sorry, we thought today might be a good opportunity, since we have so many representatives from across the country in different areas, to actually show you the stream model of the game. And this is the game board. You saw a small picture of it, and hopefully it's zoomed in on your screen and you can see it a little bit more up close now. I just want to remind you that when we're working with a local community, what we're trying to do is help them explore the connections between land use and water quality and the impacts of our choices on a landscape. Now, the goal ultimately is to reduce the non-point source pollution to the stream by implementing tools that meet a clean water goal. And this stream that you see on the screen right now is the stream that we're playing for. Now, what you're going to notice is this is what we call a small headwater stream. You know, it's a fictional landscape, which means that while you're seeing a variety of different things on here, it might not see everything that you would normally see in your particular community or in these different land uses, but you should see a lot of things that you can really resonate with. And so just want to kind of draw your attention. We have 4 different land uses on this board. Up in this top left-hand corner, we have the forest land use. And you'll see a variety of different things that are going on there in the forest. Just down below, we have a traditional farmland or agricultural type of land use. To the right of that, we have a residential land use. And then above the residential, we have what we call a city. And you'll see a lot of the traditional types of things that you would see in a normal city. John noted on the presentation that we also see the watershed boundary in this green line here, which helps you to understand that all these different land uses and the things that are going on actually are within the watershed boundary of what's going to impact this stream that we're dealing with today. Now, we'll see that each one of these different land uses actually comes with what we call a starting pollutant load. And what this helps us to understand is every one of these land uses is actually contributing equally to the pollution in this particular headwater stream. The goal here is not to actually point fingers, but to understand that we all play a role in this system. And we all play a role not only in the contributions, as well as how do we help resolve those and make better land use choices. And even you'll note down here, we have this undeveloped land that I noted out to you. Even that has a pollutant load and it's helping to contribute. Now, in this particular demonstration, we are going to be dealing with sediment. And so each one of these initial loads are the amount of load of sediment that's coming from each of these land uses. And you'll note that if you tally all of those up, our starting pollutant load is 205. Now we've actually established for this particular round that what we want is our clean water goal is going to be 75 units of sediment. Now, this clean water goal has been determined through scientific study to protect human health and aquatic life in this particular stream that we all care so much about. We have to get that pollutant load lower than 75 units by the end of the game in order to protect the water body and its uses. We just need to also remember, though, that sediment's natural. It plays very important functions in the system. And so our goal over time here is to actually reduce where we have excess sediment. I'm not trying to eliminate all of it, just the excess that can lead to deteriorating water quality issues. Now, we're going to go to the next screen here, and I'm going to zoom you in on the farmland use. What you'll notice here is that we have a lot of traditional farmland uses and activities. We have monocrops, we have empty or conventionally tilled fields, we have animal grazing happening right up here. And what you see here in the middle, this is actually some silviculture that's left over from our farmland that would normally happen over here. So that's not really part of what we're focusing on, is all of these things that are to the left-hand side of the stream. And again, we're looking at sources of sediment and excess sediment. Now, normally, as John had indicated, we would have land use teams, and we'd all be sitting around a board that was approximately 5 feet in diameter, and we would have about 12 to 20 of us just sitting around this board, and we would break you up into the 4 different land uses, and so you'd have a team of maybe 3 to 6 different people that would be working on the particular farmland land use with you, and you'd be able to discuss some of these things. But for today's demonstration, with all of us, we've got about 40 of us here online, and just to give you a flavor of what it's like to play the game, we're all going to play together and as one land use. So we're going to all vote on cards and those sorts of things as part of the farmland land use here in the beginning. Again, you would normally have time to talk and do some various things, but at this point, what we're going to do is, first of all, I would like to draw to your attention that there's a variety of different sources of what we would imagine to be excess sediment within this land use. And we would ask for you to break out into your small group and talk about what some of these are, and maybe identify them and come back and tell us about maybe one that you see that's of particular interest to your group. For the purpose of this demo, I'm going to ask, hey Maggie, do you mind unmuting yourself and maybe pointing out a source of excess sediment that you notice on the board?
Yeah, Karen, I think that conventionally tilled field is missing a vegetated buffer.
So this sediment that you're seeing right here going into the stream, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example, Maggie. Thank you very much. I'll just also note that up here in the cattle grazing is another area where you might have noticed that there's a potential for some excess sediment. And even down here, you see some additional sediment that's coming from this irrigation piping. So great, thank you very much. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to jump over to this next board, and what I'm showing you here in the farmland land use for the headwater stream version, we actually have 7 tool cards. Now I've blown up and I'm showing you 6 of them here so you can get a better idea and see a little bit of detail about what John was discussing as far as being able to see the titles. You'll actually see some of these boxes with the cost and the reduction in sediment load are a little hard to see, so I've added them underneath each card. Now, what I'd like you guys to do is I'd like to jump over in just a minute, but take a look at these 6 different cards and think about if you guys were everybody that's here today, almost 40 of us, if you were wanted to play a card, which card would you want to play in the first round of the game? We'll have 6 options. So take a look at these. I'm going to wait for just a second, and then I'm going to pop us back over to the slides and let everybody engage in voting on Poll Everywhere. So while I'm giving you a second to kind of look at this and make a decision, most people are kind of judging cost versus this reduction in sediment. I'm gonna ask if Maggie or Cole could please put the Poll Everywhere link in the chat. And while we do that, again, I'm going to jump you back over to the slides and open up the voting so that you can vote on which tool card you would most like to see me play for this first round of play. And the voting's open, so feel free to jump on in. Maggie, can you verify for me that you guys can see the Poll Everywhere poll?
Yep, we can see it.
Perfect. Okay. Oops, sorry about that. Well, looks like we might be having a technical glitch for some reason. Just to keep things flowing along, I'm going to go ahead and just make a decision for us and say that you all decided, Maggie had brought out about the conventionally tilled field. So we're going to say that we're going to play tool card B. We're going to move over to the next slide here, and I just want to show you the really great feature about these tool cards is that as you go to place them on the board, you'll notice that it actually shows what that practice would look like and corrects what you're seeing on the original board. So you'll see as we move that into place, we actually now see that they've put some cover crops on that traditionally tilled field. And so you can see here that now then there's some cover crops and that sediment is actually missing now. So that's great news. And what we're going to do now is we're going to jump over and show you what the scorecard would look like. And if you imagine that all of the land uses got a chance to actually play, what we would have done is we now tally and we see that it appears that residential would have decreased their sediment load by 15. We decreased our sediment load from farmland by 15. And as we total all of that up, we're now down to 155 sediment load. So we're making good headway towards our goal. So we will jump over and we'll see that you can tell that the tool card that we had played the first round has an X on it because we can't play the same card twice. So what we will do is we'll actually just now imagine that it's round 2 and you guys are thinking about, well, what tool card might you want to play second? And it looks that we've had a technical difficulty on our Poll Everywhere, unfortunately. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask if maybe you can put in the chat just real quickly one of these letters. It's not going to be scientific, but Cole can just make a judgment call on which letter she thinks she might see the most of. We'll give it just a minute to let those kind of scroll through. But again, it's kind of that what a lot of people are doing at this point in time are doing that cost benefit analysis of what are the cost versus what are the actual reduction in sediment load that we're going to see. So to that end, Cole, do you have a overall idea? Maybe you're saying it seems like maybe it's choice E, which is this manage grazing, which is going to cost 2 units of money, and it's going to reduce our sediment load by another 15. That's a great contribution. So we'll come back over here to see what that actually would look like. And you'll see that as we manage that grazing, we've now reduced that large mud puddle In the field, we've actually increased some vegetation along the stream so that we don't have that sediment going into the stream from here. And then that does look like, if I were those cows, I'd rather be in that area as well. Perfect. Okay, so then if we jump over, and John's helped us out and shown what this would look like as far as our scorecard. And again, we're just mimicking, but if we had other land uses that were actually contributing to reduction in sediment load as well, you can see those numbers have changed. But you can see that John showed us that we've reduced our sediment load by another 15, which takes us down to a sediment load of only 20 at this point in time after round 2. And as a game board, everybody has come together and we've gotten our sediment load all the way down to 105. So we only have 30 more points that we've got to reduce in order to meet our clean water goal. So that's a great job. So instead of doing a round 3 with our farmland, I want to give you an opportunity to actually see a different land use a little bit up close as well. So I want to show you the city land use on the board, point out a few sources of sediment here as well. You've got a construction site. You'll notice that there's a couple of different, what would be stormwater retention ponds that you'll see here. You have some outlets that looks like releasing some sediment into our stream here. You know, traditional strip malls as well as high rises, more of a dense downtown area. You also notice that we have some stormwater drains in our streets and some litter and different debris that would be contributing things here. Even what looks like we have maybe some grass trimmings and things of that sort up and by this parking lot. So you'll see as you get into these game boards, there's a lot of different details and things that we can see. So again, each different land use has a variety of tool cards, and these tool cards give us an opportunity to see some different practices that can help us to reduce these sediment loads within these different land uses. And something that I want to note to you here on this particular, you know, we've got another 6 tool cards. There's actually 8 tool cards that exist for the city land use in the stream version of the local leader game. But we'll notice that you have things like involve citizens and involve and educate citizens, which is more of an education type of thing, where you also have things like adopt redevelopment ordinances, which are, you know, plans that and policies that would have to happen actually within your city government. And then we have other things like redesigning streets to reduce runoff, which are things that we would actually have to physically do and go in and build and change within a different, that particular city location, and even maintenance, stormwater ponds. So wide diversity of types of actions that can happen that help to really represent the diversity of types of actions that a community could take as well. And again, each one has a cost as well as a reduction in the sediment load that you'll see. So I want to ask you guys one more time, let's just kind of engage and see which one of these tool cards would you like to see played on the city? And we'll do this in the chat again. And just go ahead and pick any one, and I'll go ahead and show you what that looks on the Zoom board. Steve's wondering how much money we have left. It doesn't really matter right now, Steve. That was one of the features that John mentioned that we don't have time to really feature in and show you about the cost and those sorts of things on this particular demo. But let's just assume that we still have 2 units of money just for fun. Cole, do we have any consensus? Maggie's saying A. Okay, we can go with A. Perfect. Well, then we'll jump over. And again, I just want to take this opportunity to show you that similarly, as we go to move this over, we get to start to see the differences that this actual practice we'll have as we implement it. And what you'll notice is that we have a lot of vegetation right here. We're no longer going to be seeing the vegetation that's coming off into the parking lot. And so that's where we'll place our tool card. And again, this particular one, it cost us 2, but it reduced our sediment load by 15, which is great. Remember, we only had 30 that we had to reduce our sediment load by the whole round 3. So we're halfway there with ours. And John's updated our numbers. What you'll see here is that after everybody played their cards for round 3 with significant help, because we reduced things by an extra 15, what we've reached is 60 pollutant load, 60 sediment units, which means that we meet our goal. So yay, great job, everybody. And just wanted to wrap back around and remind you that we had that undeveloped land that was down in the right-hand corner, bottom right-hand corner of the board. And this is a piece that, as John had mentioned, we could play if we needed to, just to help emphasize to people that, you know, there are a lot of events that are out of our control. And if that land were to be purchased and maybe developed, it might increase the sediment load. So if we had, our goal was 75, we were down to 60. But if we had an additional 25 units that were added in, then that could really impact as to whether we were meeting our clean water goal or not. So just one final image I want to show you guys. This actually shows every tool card for each of the different 4 land uses actually placed on the board, just to show you that every tool card has a place. And so it's really wonderful to be able to go in and see all of those different actions and see how those come into play. With that, John, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you and let you spend a little bit of time and talk to them about the classroom game.
Great, Karen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Well, I am now on my iPhone because we lost power again. So as long as you can hear and see me, if you could share the slides and go to slide 19, I can present. If you could advance the slides for me.
I am trying to get there now. Maggie, are we on slide 19 for everyone?
Yes, I can see it too.
Perfect. Okay.
Thank you, Karen. So I'll just say next. I apologize, everyone, but once you guessed it, power would go out right before our seminar started. So that was a very quick demonstration of the local leader stream model. And again, all the models operate about the same way. The different features of the water in the different land uses vary from game to game, but overall gameplay is the same. Now, when we thought about the use of the watershed game with youth audiences, we realized through teacher focus groups that we had to do some adaptation. And therefore, we created what is called the classroom version of the game. The classroom version is an adaptation of the stream model currently. It is targeted for use with grades 5 through 12. And when we looked at education standards, we focused in on grade 7 in terms of meeting different education standards. With the classroom version, we had to adapt to things we were observing, seeing, and experiencing with our own teaching, is that sometimes 7th grade classes are 32, 36 students. How are you going to play the watershed game with that many students? And all these barriers were overcome with the development of the classroom version. So what I want to do is talk a little bit through some of those adaptations and how it's different. But one of the things that we did do is we quickly learned the classroom version could not just be about water science. It had to include math, social studies, English language arts, and some of these other things. So the watershed game is truly an interdisciplinary tool that can be used in the classroom. Next slide, please, Karen. So again, same science concepts, but it has to operate a little bit different. So in the classroom version, students are divided up into smaller student teams where they work on their own for much of the Watershed Game. And this is all guided by something called the student worksheet. And I'll show you that in just a moment. In the local leader versions of the game, sometimes you can play with the Watershed Game money, or candy is sometimes the units we use, but we couldn't do that in the classroom version. So we actually created Watershed Game money that looks like Monopoly money, so we could also increase financial literacy with the students and the youth that we play the game with. The other adaptation is we no longer talk about points of pollution with the Watershed Game. We talk about something called PUs, or pollution units. And finally, some of the original game components aren't used in the classroom version, such as the unanticipated events that I spoke of. Next slide, Karen. So what is illustrated here is one of the things we did with the classroom version is, instead of having one giant game board, let's say 3 by 5 feet, we broke it up into smaller game boards for each of the land units. So the one that you're seeing on the screen here is the farmland game board. And this is roughly about 20 by 30 inches. What's illustrated in the picture on the screen is actually a group of teachers that we were training to use the classroom version. Now, I don't like to put pictures with students in it for obvious reasons of photo release, but when we play with students, this is exactly what the farmland student team would be doing. They would have their land use map in front of them on their tables, and they would be debating the different tool cards that you see the various people holding here. Next slide, Karen. So one of the other adaptations we made with the classroom version is this student worksheet. And so during the local leader version of the game facilitator guides each land use team through their play, if you will, as we go around the game board. In the student or classroom version, the students follow the instructions on a 2-page worksheet that guides them step by step what to do. So in other words, the teacher explains the instructions, and then these smaller student teams have to follow their worksheet and complete all the blanks on the worksheet. The other thing that we added with the classroom version is a big emphasis on they needed to choose tools that would reduce pollution, but they could not go broke as a land use team. So this piece about financial literacy and also balancing cost and benefit. Next slide, Karen. So here's a close-up of the student worksheet. Now, what is hard to pick up as we do the demonstration virtually, when we play the local leader version with a group of adults, we actually play in rounds, no different than you would play a board game at home. In the classroom version, students don't operate in rounds. They try to achieve a clean water goal for their land use first, and then we bring them back together as a class at the end. So again, what the student worksheet here is really giving the student teams item by item instructions about what they need to do. And by the way, in the instructions for the classroom version, this whole student exercise is about 20 minutes long. Next slide, Karen. The other piece that we adapted in the classroom version is realizing we had groups of young adults playing this game. And we needed to give everybody in the land use teams something active to do. And so we created these roles that different students or young adults could play or take part in as part of their land use. So as you can see, there are 6 different roles that can be assigned to students in the team: a reader, a banker, a reporter, the scribe recording everything on the worksheet, the mapper who will place the tool cards on the land use game board, and the pollution specialist talking about what the tools did to reduce pollution, again, using that plain language on the back. And so you can start to see that we've built some mechanism here to make sure the students are engaged through their assignment, which is to reduce water pollution and obtain this clean water goal. Next slide, Karen. So here's another illustration of student land use teams doing their work. This is the residential land use team off in the corner of the classroom, if you will. This was at one of our teacher trainings. But what you see here is this group of residential land use team players choosing between their different tool cards, debating amongst each other which one to play. Maybe Karen, you can point out to the Watershed Game money there in the lower left-hand corner. There you go. So you have these Watershed money, just like you do with Monopoly. Up in the upper right, you can see that the woman's glasses there are on the worksheet. So she obviously is the recorder, recording everything that the student land use team is debating and choosing. Next slide, Karen. All right, so after the students complete their student worksheet, again, operating in their land use teams, the teacher or instructor pulls all the land use teams back together for the end of the game, which we call the full class play. And so this is part 2 of the classroom version. And it might be hard to see in this picture here, but in the middle of the floor with this group of 5th grade students, I was actually leading the game this day, you can see they pieced together their different land use maps to create the giant game board. So that is 3 by 5 feet. It may not look like that at that scale in that picture, but in this case, the teacher has chosen to piece together the land use maps on the classroom floor. And the students have gathered around it to begin their reporting out on their progress by land use. So here is where we're calling on that land use team reporter to again, talk about what the team has made for their choices. Next slide, Karen. Here's another illustration of what that might look like in a table format. So in this case, you can see the teacher who is leaned over the Watershed Game here. The students have pieced together their different land use maps, and now they're talking through what each land use has done. One of the things that I did not mention earlier is all the Watershed Games, regardless of version, are laminated, which allows for writing on them with dry erase markers. And so what you see the teacher doing here is actually writing the number of pollution units each land use team has gotten down to after their efforts. And we do the same thing with the local leader version. So at this point, what's happening in this picture is student teams are reporting out. So somebody has a public speaking role. The recorder for the team has the stuff on the worksheet, and we have the banker keeping track of the money, for example. This full class play, where we have all of this done together, encompasses about 75 minutes if you play very efficiently. But what's more commonly done with the classroom version of the game is its play is spread out over a number of class periods. What we built with the classroom version is a lot of flexibility because we know teachers and other informal educators will change things for their settings and surroundings. Next slide, Karen. Lots to see on this screen here, but what I wanted to illustrate is the classroom version has very descriptive step-by-step instructions. And so you can see here on that second image there, Karen, where we have it divided about what the teacher should cover in class period 1. So for example, on Monday, and when you come back for class period 2, which could be Wednesday for science class, we're actually going to play the game. And so this is all prescripted out in instructions for the game that you as a teacher or a facilitator would follow step by step. And this is the same for the local leader versions as well. They all come with complete step-by-step instructions. In addition, we include different appendices or scripts that you can follow an example as in opening and leading the game. Next slide, Karen. So with that said, I know that's a very quick summary and presentation about the different versions of the Watershed game. So again, more information is available on the website. As we're going to take some questions from you now. Continue to insert your questions in the chat box or in the Q&A panel, and we'll take the remaining of our time to answer some of those questions. On the Watershed Game website, resource that you might want to look at is the Watershed Information Guide, which contains more information about each of the models and also contains our contact information for follow-up questions. Where we're going from here, and one of the reasons that this demonstration session was inspired by, is many people were reaching out to us regarding training for the Watershed Game and its use. And they weren't quite sure which training or which model they might want training on or which session to participate in. So that drove us to create this short demonstration that hopes that it will guide you to decide if you want to participate in a training and which version you would like to get trained on. And so upcoming here in October, we are going to feature 2 different training sessions. On Monday and Tuesday, October 25th and 26th, we will have training on the local leader models of the game. To use the local leader versions of the game, it does really require you to participate in this training. There's a lot of complexities that go into leading this giant board game with a group of adults or local leaders. More specifics about this day-and-a-half training will be out on Monday. The classroom version, now when we develop the classroom version, it literally comes in a board game box, no different than you would buy any other board game, complete with all the instructions. We designed the classroom version to be used outside of you could pick it up, read the instructions, and you should be able to use it. However, we have found that most people are inspired by going through a training with the classroom version. So on Tuesday afternoon, October 26th, we're going to have a afternoon training on the classroom version. When the training announcement comes out on Monday, you will be able to register for one or the other or both of these. For our formal K through 12 teachers that are joining us today and interested in the classroom version training, you will be able to join us just for that Tuesday. And we do believe that we will have a number of teacher substitute pay stipends available. So you can take time off from your classroom schedule, find a substitute teacher so you could attend this training. So more on that will be released on Monday. So with that said, I think we will start to wrap things up on our end in terms of presentation, and we'll entertain some questions that you most certainly have about the local leader and the classroom version and how all of this works. So with that, I am going to lean to one of my colleagues, Maggie, who's going to ask us questions that you've submitted through the Q&A panel. And we'll tackle as many of those as we can before we need to end at 4:15 Central Standard Time. Maggie.
Great. Well, I'm going to throw this first question to Karen. And it is sediment the primary pollutant issue in the Watershed Game, or is it only this version, or are there other pollutants dealt with as well? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you. That's a great question, Maggie. So actually, each of the 3 original models of the Watershed Game local leader version, the stream, the lake, and the river, all can be played for sediment or phosphorus, either one. Now, the newer version, the coast model, can be played for sediment, nitrogen, or phosphorus. And then it is also played, so you can pick any one of those three as your water quality parameter. And then it is also played at the same time for resilience or increasing resilience to flooding in the community. So there is a choice, and it really depends on what some of the biggest concerns are in your local area as to whether with the three upstream versions, you might want to play for sediment specifically or phosphorus. And then, like I said, in the coastal region, it depends on what the issues are in different areas of the country, whether you want to play for which one of those particular water quality parameters. And then, like I said, we have the addition of resilience. So.
Great, thanks, Karen. So the next question I'll throw to John, and this question comes from Kelly. She asks, what is the price of the classroom version? John, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. The price of the classroom version is $75. It does come with everything in the box that you need to play. The order form is located on the website, so you can find out more information there as well.
Great, thanks, John. Okay, I'm going to throw this one to Karen. This question comes from Caitlin Goodwin, and she asks, will the classroom version training be recorded for teachers who cannot get away from the classroom to attend?
It will not be recorded. However, we will be having additional trainings coming up over time. We do hope that these will actually start to be happening in person. But because we understand the constraints and we don't know how long we will be tied to this virtual world, we will continue to try to offer trainings. And I believe that we're hoping to do one in the first part of next year. Is that true, John?
Joining us, Caitlin. The reason we did a classroom version training earlier this summer in June, and we do breakout rooms, and it's really hard to record all that and combine it together so someone not participating could really follow. So we haven't been able to successfully record it in a way that would be beneficial to someone not attending the training.
Great. So Karen, I'll give you this next question. It's from Stephen Evans, and they ask, should we purchase the board games prior to attending the trainings?
You certainly can, and we don't want to shy you away from that. Depending on what you think which board games you might use, you might want to wait and decide which ones are most applicable for you and your local community. The training will actually enable you to utilize any one of the local three models, the local leader models. And if you attend the teacher training, then the teacher training will do the stream version, which is what it's modeled after, and the coast. So by all means, if you want to order all 4 or 6, please do. But you might want to wait and see which ones you might find that you'll use the most, and then start with those.
Okay, thanks, Karen. So the next question will be for John, and Danny Wallums asks, I see that you have adopted some of this to Jamboard. Is there a way that we will be able to also get a copy of that for virtual instruction?
Great question. At this point, we're not sharing the Jamboards. But what we are currently working on is doing reconnaissance about how to play the Watershed game digitally with other audiences. The Jamboards that we've constructed so far are just for training, which we've had to develop because of COVID. Again, I'll reiterate, I've been using the Watershed game for 15 years. It was designed to be an in-person activity, and it does very well at that. It's been very effective. And it's just been wonderful. But in the time of the pandemic, we've had to change course. And right now, what we've been able to do is piece together training for all of you to understand and to build your capacity to use the game in person. But we haven't shared those Jamboards yet. But we're going to work on that. That's in our next work plan.
Thanks, John. Next question's for Karen. Kelly says, thanks for the direction to the order form and the price. Can you get the Coast model version and the classroom version? I only see one option for the classroom version.
Kelly, unfortunately not yet. We have two of our team members, actually I guess maybe three of us now, that are prioritizing working on that and getting that fully developed and ready for production. But as John noted earlier in the discussion, because of there's just a few small tweaks and things that need to be changed, especially the language and making sure that we have it at a level at which an 8th grade student could understand, and hopefully maybe even a little bit lower, because quite a few of us have actually used the Watershed Game classroom version with all the way down to 5th grade students. It's taking us a little bit of time, and we do hope to have that ready for production early next year. So please stay tuned, but not yet.
Thanks, Karen. John, related question. Is the Coast model complete available? Can they get it today?
Great question. So I know many people have been interested in the Coast model, which we've been working on, believe it or not, for about 1.5 years now. The Coast model is currently in print production, and so we were hoping that would be available by the end of September, and lo and behold, it's September 30th. So we will have the Coast model available here in October, and so stay tuned on that. And if you're certainly we will be emailing everyone who participated in the demo, but we'll be announcing that online and through email that the Coast model is now available.
Oh, that's great news. Okay. Our next question I'll shoot to Karen. It's from Mitzi Vincent. It's, I teach in our district's virtual academy. Students can meet with me face-to-face occasionally. Would the classroom version work with a hybrid option?
John, I'm going to let you take that.
I would say, I guess my short answer is no, not at this time. Again, you know, the classroom versions were developed for this in-person experience. I know COVID and the pandemic has been happening for a while, but we've been challenged for the last year trying to imagine what a digital play of the Watershed Game would look like with a group of 18 adults or 30 students. And so we haven't been able to put together the digital platform that would be necessary to do that. So not quite yet. I would just discourage that.
Thanks, John. I think this next question might be for you as well. Danny Wallums asks, are we allowed to adapt your models to localize them if we have graphics people, make them look more like our own local streets, systems, etc.? And then disclaimer, he says, 100% understand why if that's not the case.
Well, the Watershed Game itself is quite adaptable. Once you start to use the game, you know, people verge off the written directions and use it different ways. We don't give out our graphics per se, they are copyrighted, but I have known other people to create some of their own tools to use with the game, but that's not commonly done. We did have a partner try to create a saltwater estuary version a number of years ago, and they did a very good job at that. And what we've done with the Coast model is kind of expand that to help meet some of those needs with the local water resource. But, you know, to your comment about making it look like more like your local water resource, one of the magic ideas about the Watershed Game is that it's more generic. And so when you bring participants together around the Watershed Game, especially adults with local leaders, that it isn't looking at a particular lake. We're not looking at Lake Washington per se. We're looking at a generic lake, which allows people sometimes to put down their barriers a little bit and talk more freely about how tools can be used across one land use to the other. So not at this time do we allow for, I guess, customizing it, but once you get it, you might be able to do some things on your own.
John, and that looks like it's our last question. So I just want to thank everybody for sending in those questions, and then I'll pass it off to John to wrap things. Oh, guess, Karen?
I just wanted to add that another feature of the game that John discussed right before we went to the demo was a lot of the pieces that we weren't able to include in the demo. Things like the unanticipated event cards and the plan cards and some of these pieces, and which really allow any local community and the facilitator working with that community who knows their issues to really utilize teachable moments to help drive home important factors that are going on in that community, different tools and resources that might be of particular interest to them, and different challenges. And so this is a feature of the entire program that is really versatile, and it makes it so that it's even easier to really adapt it and fine tune as to what is most important types of things for your community to talk about. But that's all I wanted to add. So John?
Well, I just want to say thank you, Karen, for leading the demo. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today and putting up with our technical glitches. I don't think I've ever given a seminar over my iPhone before. We had this very well rehearsed, and it did not flow as well as we anticipated. Let me just ask my colleague Cole or Maggie, is there anything else in the chat box or in the question panel that we should talk about openly with everyone?
Nothing here.
Okay.
There is one more question that came in, but I think you are answering that with the upcoming trainings. It's just that, do you have a train the trainer program? I'm thinking about local school teacher trainings.
Yeah. So again, what I will reiterate is on Monday, we will announce upcoming trainings for October, and you will all receive details about those. They will specify a detailed agenda so you get a better idea about what we do. Again, speaking from experience, we've now trained more than 300 people across the country to use the Watershed Game through this train the trainer approach, and it has worked very well. We have the Watershed Game in use in more than 22 states now. And I guess for my part, teaching water education now for more than 20 years, PowerPoint is not my go-to anymore. It is the Watershed Game. It has been extremely effective to bring stakeholders and youth audiences together to learn about how land use and water resources are related, and how what we do on the land can impact water quality. And in the case of the coast model, also impact quantity in terms of flooding and risk resiliency. And so I hope that this demonstration has answered some of your questions about the Watershed Game. We will follow up again with an email, and by all means contact us with your questions. And we hope that some of you will join us for our upcoming training here in October. So thank you all again. Have yourselves a great day, and we look forward to meeting you or running into you virtually in person in the future.